This is Effie back with another episode of You Do What? We're here in Haymarket, Sydney in Chintaria Budalove Malaysian Chinese restaurant. I cannot wait for you to meet today's guest. Her work has been featured in Vogue, AFR, The Australian. Her name is Lucy Wark. In 2018, Lucy left McKinsey and 2 years later started her own brand called Normal. Normal sells sex toys. It also produces education and guidance on how to have great sex.
No, that's right.
Lucy, thank you so much for meeting me.
Thank you so much for having me. As I said on the way here, I'm really starving, so this is great.
This is perfect. We've got good food coming. What did you do today? What does a normal day look like, pun intended?
Well, that's a good question. We have a new product launching next week, which is called Plum. I think I can say that because then it'll be out. But often the days before a new product launch involve a massive checklist of like checking all the photos work, checking all the videos on the website play, making sure that the manual on the website is accurate, making sure people are going to get emails after its launch, making sure all the marketing we're doing and like the billboard is going ahead as planned. And so there's like essentially just a lot of coordination and being like a conductor of an orchestra vibes that happen, and you always think it will take less time than it does.
And who designs the product behind Normal?
Basically, like it's a work between myself and Georgia Grace, who's my co-founder. So she's a sex educator and works in clinic with couples and individuals and does workshops for groups and has a book and does all sorts of like sex education. And so I think a lot of the expertise side of what are we looking for in a product, Georgia really helps to inform. And then we also do spend a little bit of time asking lots of questions of our customers and doing a lot of customer research. I think what's kind of interesting in the sex space is often people can tell you what they're trying to achieve in sex or what it is, like what their goals are, but not necessarily how to get there. So we have some very funny experiences in customer research where, you know, people will be very clear and be like, I really want to close the orgasm gap in my relationship. You know, for a lot of people in Australia, if you're in straight or heterosexual relationships, lots of people find that the female partner orgasms a lot less. So that might be like a very common goal. Or people might say, I'm working on libido, or they might say, I want to get hard more easily and stay hard longer. So there's like lots of different goals that people can be solving for in sex. But if you ask people to design products for you, you get very funny results where you often just like people have 10 features that they want and then they put them all onto one product and it looks like an octopus. And so a little bit of so a little bit of what we do is sort of trying to strike that balance between being everything to everyone in a product and looking insane, and then creating something that's like quite sleek and organic and feels like a beautiful object that also does the job. So yeah, there's a phase of design that's customer research. There's a phase that is working with our manufacturers to bring that to life. There's also a phase that is using Play-Doh to shape what we think it should look like, and then basically just like holding up the Play-Doh until we're happy and then giving that to someone to 3D model and 3D print, and we iterate through that.
When you go to the manufacturer with the model, do they know what they're making?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that is so fascinating about this industry is obviously like, for a consumer, particularly if you haven't bought toys before, it can feel really taboo and really daring and, you know, something that you whisper about with your friends if you've had a couple of wines. But behind all of that is an industry, like there is basically an entire city in China that houses the global sex toy production industry, and it is utterly unromantic and like the least sexy thing ever when you're sitting on a production line and sort of making sure that all the quality control is done right, or if you're like at trade shows chatting to manufacturers about what features they're suggesting or what they're selling lots of or anything like that. Like it's something that I've always found really funny about the job, that it's simultaneously like this thing that's sensual, taboo, erotic, but it's also just actually like really prosaic in reality. Or there are moments where it feels yeah, it feels deeply unsexy.
I also thought it was ironic because I'm Chinese and the
Yeah.
conversation about sex in China is probably even more behind than Australia. But something like, what, 70%, correct me if I'm wrong, of sex toys are made in China?
I would even say it's probably higher, yeah.
Oh,
I think,
gosh.
and I think there's also an interesting thing, which is that I think a lot of people, you know, it's very easy to have an outdated view of what like manufacturing looks like in a place like China. And I think sometimes it does a disservice to manufacturers. Like the best experts in the world on sex toys are manufacturers who have manufactured 200 or 1,000 vibrators before. So a lot of the time we'll go to our manufacturer and be like, look, here's where our designs are at currently, and we want it to accomplish this, this, and this, and they'll be able to say, oh, like that won't work for the following engineering reasons, you should probably do it this way, or like we've seen this tried before, have you thought about doing this thing? Like there's a degree of just, you've got experience, and so you know your industry really well, that I think is actually often missed. So they're fantastic, and it's just the experience also of visiting manufacturers is a deeply hilarious one that I recommend to anyone, because whenever you go to visit a manufacturer, you'll have like the factory, you'll have the warehouse, you'll have like a design team who are all sitting there like with all these crazy mock-ups of toys on their screens. And then you'll have the showroom, which is where every toy that a manufacturer has ever made is like laid out for you as well. So you go in, it looks like the set of like The Bachelor or like a dating show.
Yeah, like a
But then
museum
just
of
imagine a dating show backdrop with like hundreds of vibrators laid out. It is like surreal and hilarious. Yeah.
I've never had a sex toy before, and I went on your website. And
Happy
I
to
did the
support
quiz.
if you require any recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes, I went on the website to normal, and the cool thing about it is that you can do a quiz, and depending on your level of experience, the website will recommend a couple of products for you. So I did that, and I got 3 recommendations. I got the Frankie, the Quinn,
Yep.
and the Cheek.
Nice.
Can you?
Walk through.
Yeah. What's the use case, and what was the inspiration behind the 3?
Absolutely. Well, the range as a whole is designed to be pretty curated. So we kind of want to have often like one of a really classic category of toy that's a really high quality version of that, but we don't want to have 10. Like we want to make it pretty easy to navigate so that people can find what they want. Because I think, you know, none of us grew up learning in sex ed about pleasure anatomy, and it can feel really overwhelming when you go into a sex shop and there are like 500 purple dildos everywhere. Frankie is a really good beginner toy. It's what's known as a bullet vibrator, so they often look like a bullet or sort of a small, relatively straight toy.
Yeah.
And they're great for external play. They're really discreet, easy to take with you, often a pretty accessible price point.
Yeah.
So they're a really good starter, and then you'd use that, for example, if you're a person with a vulva, you might use it like around your nipples, inner thigh, like vulva, clitoris, anything like that. So it's a really good one if you like external stimulation. It's a good beginner entry-level toy.
And it's about the size of a zucchini?
Oh, no, about this big.
Oh, okay.
A little smaller. But you can go as big or as small as you want within the industry.
Okay.
There's some absolutely insanely large toys out there. And yeah, so that'll be like one example. A toy like Quinn is, it's actually technically double-ended, but the thing that most people get really excited about is the clitoral air stimulation.
Yeah.
So that whole category, basically, if you missed it in sex education, which we all did, I think a lot of us grew up thinking that penetration is the heart of what sex is, like penis and vagina sex. I don't know if you have any censors on this, what you can say here, but I'm just saying all the words. But yeah, so
No
we all,
censors.
yeah.
That's a comedy podcast.
Absolutely. We all grew up seeing penis and vagina sex and penetration on screen as what sex was. So that's like obviously very heterosexual, but it's also very penetration focused. And I think the thing that is really interesting is that the science of sex has developed rapidly, and also the breadth of understanding of the science of sex has grown rapidly in like the last couple of decades. And so one of the things that I will go to my grave saying, it will be like carved on my gravestone, is like penetration doesn't produce orgasm for most people with vulvas. Like it's somewhere around the zone of 20 to 30% will orgasm from penetration alone. So I think a lot of people grew up watching those movies where they're like, wow, they start having sex, there's very little outer course or foreplay, like no one's touching each other outside, they just like go straight to penetration, there's no lube, there's no condoms, there's no consent conversation, and then they both orgasm with a screaming orgasm at the exact same time. And so if you have like grown up with that narrative, it's really like pretty confusing when you're like, wait, why is my body not reacting in that way? And I think a lot of people have that experience. So the other fun thing to learn from the science of sex is that clitoral stimulation is actually by far the most important form of stimulation for a person with a vulva to have an orgasm, particularly if you can combine it with penetration for some people or G-spot stimulation or whatever else like your body uniquely likes. And so part of why Quinn and toys like Quinn have become so popular, it's our bestseller, is that it allows people to have clitoral stimulation. So it sort of uses air pressure on the outer sort of bud or glands of the clitoris. So that's what you can see on the surface. So if you're like looking at someone's vulva, you have like labia, vagina, oh my god, I'm losing the words, but like where you urinate out of, and then above that is the clitoris. Exactly. I was like, what is the anatomical term I was searching for? I'm going to leave it. But yeah, the clitoris and clitoral stimulation is like the heart of pleasure for a lot of people with vulvas. So that's why toys like that are so good. I think a lot of people will say to us, like, it's the first time I had an orgasm using a toy like that.
Does it suck or does it blow?
There's options.
Options.
So different brands there are some brands that have like sucking motions. There's also blowing motions or like gentle pulsing motions. So there's a whole range. In this case, it's like it will push air for our one towards the clitoris. But that also works by like stimulating blood flow. Effectively, like the way to think about what the clitoris is, it's like it has erectile tissue the same way the penis has erectile tissue. And so stimulation of the clitoris has like a similar effect.
Sure. And you can also use it as a keyboard cleaner.
I assume so, yeah. Give it time. And then I don't know if you want to go through another toy. No, you're fine. I can do another one if you want.
No, this is super interesting. You have guidance on your website to help people find the G-spot. I could tell you where the G-spot is.
Yeah. Also, it's not a spot technically as well.
What is it, like an area?
Yeah, it's an area. It's a zone.
It's a zone.
Yeah. I think it's funny. The G-spot. It was actually named by a scientist called Grafenberg after himself, which offends lots of people in the sex space because, a man named a piece of
female anatomy after himself.
Yeah. But yeah, I think maybe in popular culture and like Cosmo magazines in the 90s and 2000s, the G-spot was seen as just like a button that you press, and you just press it and then you squirt and come everywhere. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. So it's part of like a whole network of sensitive tissue and nerves that kind of wraps around the urinary tract and the clitoris. There's some good anatomical models out there that I think can be really helpful, but I do wish that we had been taught this in school, because it's so weird that we were taught anatomy and organs were just kind of left off because they don't serve a reproductive function.
Again, going back to my Chinese roots, it just never was, not even like sexual pleasure, just pleasure in everyday lives. It's just never been prioritized. And I think growing up with that kind of teaching, I never thought I was missing out on anything if I wasn't getting
like flourishing
from penetrative sex, for example.
Yeah.
So why is it, aside from like obviously it feels good, why else is it important?
Yeah, well, I think it feels good is a great reason in and of itself. I think that I think also equality in relationships is important, and if you're talking about a relationship where and a lot of the time neither partner is like doing anything wrong, it's not anyone's fault, it's actually that you probably the type of sex that you've seen role modeled to you is actually just sex that comes out of a very historically patriarchal context, and so like the social scripts is like the term we would use, but like the scripts that you learn are very focused on pleasure for people with penises. And so I think we're actually just in the middle of a moment of reimagining what those scripts look like, and it's cool. Like you're starting to see, you know, I think Netflix shows are doing a much better job of when they do a sex scene, like they will show a lot more outer course, which like is the opposite of intercourse, basically like touching on the outside of the body.
Yeah.
Or some people like that word instead of foreplay, because foreplay suggests that penetration is the main event, and that this is like a secondary thing, whereas this is actually being like, no, like they're equally important, and for people with vulvas, actually like outer course might be by far the most important part of what leads to pleasure. But yeah, I think there's always a benefit to equality, and there's a benefit to feeling like you're not broken and that you're seen and that you can explore. And I think maybe also something to say about that is like that sex is not just about physical pleasure. I think for so many people, it's easy to become really orgasm centric, or it's really easy to measure sex in like measurable physical data points. And actually as well, I think there's emotional, mental sides to it, where it's like, do you feel comfortable and confident? Like, do you or do you feel scared and like you're performing, or like you can't relax? And I think the difference between those things is really big as well. Like in my view, ideally you don't want to have any part of your life where you feel like alienated from yourself or scared or ashamed. And I think maybe when you experience those feelings in sex, it's particularly hard, because it's an experience that you can't then go and debrief with other people, or a lot of people will find it very hard to like talk to their friends about those feelings, so it can just be very isolating.
I think you've also said before that the conversation about sex for men is somewhat behind the conversation women have about sex amongst ourselves. There's like a breakdown,
a gap in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that maybe one of the reasons why the conversations that men have with each other about sex are much less open, honest, vulnerable, helpful than the average set of conversations that I think groups of female friends might be having, is that stereotypes about masculinity and what it means to be a man play a big role. So I think a lot of what you'll hear from men is, I feel a lot of pressure to be bulletproof, to project strength, to project that I know what I'm doing in every situation, which can actually be the opposite of what makes for being a good partner in sex, because a lot of the time, like, you're going to need to slow down and ask what someone wants and listen and observe the cues that you're getting from like what they're reacting to positively, and that it involves admitting you don't know and then having the conversation and letting someone tell you what they like. So I think there's like a piece of it that is related to that. I think that also like a lot of men have grown up with pressure to appear dominant, alpha, super masculine, and that again doesn't encourage vulnerable, open conversations about sex with your friends. And there's probably also, like, not for everyone, but I think a lot of male friendships do still have an undercurrent of like internalized homophobia and like vulnerability, appearing too feminine and like appearing even gay. So I think there's a few different factors that mean that it's hard for. We hear from a lot of men who say that their best conversations about sex are with like female friends or their partners rather than with their male friends.
One of the reasons why your story's been so compelling, not just to me but to a wider audience, is because you started doing management consulting at McKinsey, and then you've gone to a place that's not really well understood, and you've had to pave your own path. You've done like a career strategy series where you've codified 16 different strategies for people who are looking to leave their job or find their purpose. You've done that, but I'm curious about your particular path.
If I were giving advice to someone who's like in their 9 to 5 and in a safe career, but they're not feeling stretched or fulfilled, or they're looking for something else, like they just want more out of their career, one of the things that I think strikes me when I look back at the journey of the last few years from consulting into running sex toy company, is that it's actually very hard to predict the exact destination from where you started. Yeah. But I think what you can do is direction and momentum. And a lot of people get immobilized at the start line when it comes to career change because they're putting pressure on themselves to have the exact, like, I'm going to be X in 5 to 10 years. And otherwise, without that exact certainty, it's very hard to take a forward step or take a step into a slightly different direction. So yeah, I think one of the things that when I'm looking back at, you know, my career, I was a management consultant. I found the skill set really helpful, but I knew I probably wasn't going to want to spend the rest of my life doing corporate strategy. And so I left without a job to go to, and I ran career experiments for about a year, like tested, I wrote half a play, I did reporting on like the venture capital industry in Australia, I joined a startup and then left a startup, I did a little bit of consulting that was like project based, I worked with a civil liberties and human rights organisation helping them do their strategy, like a bunch of different things. And I think for me, I was like, look, I know I want, at that point, like I know I want something else. I'm not exactly sure yet what that is. And so I could either make a massive commitment to something on a low amount of information, or I can run a series of tests to get me much better information about what I'm doing. Yeah, so I think there's like a degree of being like, what direction am I trying to head in? And then the momentum of doing that is often a little bit more about having a process that you stick to and trust that the outputs will come, rather than knowing exactly like where you're going to land as well.
When you were doing all of those experiments, how did you know what wasn't right?
I think like I knew I wasn't going to be playwright pretty quickly, because I discovered that I loved having the idea and I loved like seeing it all in my head, but you might understand this as a comedian. Yeah, it's lonely. Yeah. And watching yourself fall extremely far short of what's in your head with your execution is really painful. Yeah, I was like, I think it's just maybe over time you get a better and better sense of where an activity gives you like long stretches of being in flow, and you get a better and better sense of also the things that are negatives for you that you probably want to avoid, like the things that are going to disproportionately annoy you or undermine your fulfillment in a job, and that'll be like different for different people too. So for some people, they like having autonomy is incredibly important, and being micromanaged is actually like the thing that will sap all of the joy that they take out of a role. So I think being aware of the things that you don't love.
But conversely, what did you feel when you came across the idea of normal that made you feel like this was it?
I think there was like a series of moments probably, but I do remember one particular distinct occasion where I'd been thinking about normal and like working on the idea with a friend, and we had a lunch with a group of friends in Melbourne. In this particular group of friends, like 3 of them are really, really keen cooks. And so they were in the kitchen making poutine from scratch. So they were making poutine from scratch. We were meant to eat at 12. We ended up eating at 7 because it took so long. And so we had 7 hours sitting on the deck of this house, drinking more and more wine. And it was a fascinating one because it was mostly female friends who were sitting out there with us. And I'd mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that I was thinking about like what you could do in the sex space with, you know, products that look much more beautiful and modern in their design, and how you could create digital education, digital healthcare, like all of those things. And we just couldn't stop talking about it. Like it was like it occupied us for like hours. And lots of friends who I was speaking to, because we created space where it was safe to talk about it, were much more open about the issues they were having as well. And I think it was, for me, like as a founder or an entrepreneur or anyone who's thinking about a business, sometimes you get those moments where you're like, oh, there's like product market pull would be the boring name for it, but you're like, there's a real need here. I think there's often really good advice when you're thinking about starting a business that like you want to you want the market to be like pulling that product out of you, like people really want it. and you want to be developing like a painkiller, not a vitamin. So vitamins are like a nice to have. A painkiller is like, no, I've really got a problem and I really want to solve it and I'm motivated to solve it. And I think one of the things that conversation just pointed to for me was that there's so much taboo around this area that people miss, like the size and depth and breadth of the need. And so yeah, that was probably one moment where I was like, actually there's really something to be built here. I mean, an interesting statistic is like in Australia, like sexual dysfunction is twice as common as mental health issues. But I think most people would be deeply surprised by that, because actually we speak about mental health issues way more openly than we do issues with pain or issues with orgasm or issues with arousal or erections or anything. Like those are all still very taboo.
Yeah, so you found a clear problem you had to
Yeah.
solve. What
Yeah.
I've also heard that you actually started this experimentation thinking you might want to be in the entertainment space, and you spoke to people in the industry. What did you think you want to be, and what made you?
Yeah, at one point I was interested in like being a journalist.
Yeah. Sports journalist?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I was like a kid, I wanted to be a sports journalist. Yeah. And when I was at uni, I did a lot of like student radio, and we created a new student newspaper, which was like my first startup. And really enjoyed journalism and media. So at one point I was thinking about that, and I think I spent some time writing different pieces, and ended up. I actually think like in some ways I might end up finding my way back there at some later chapter of the career, because I actually really enjoy podcasts and conversations and that kind of work. But I think it was one of those things where I was like, I enjoy using this skill set, but as it's practiced in media, I'll spend 20% of my time getting to do really interesting thinking about this, and I'm going to spend 80% of my time like churning out articles to feed a business model that is not looking particularly strong. And I was like, I'm not sure if that's the best use of my time or skills, compared to being able to build something like normal. So yeah, I think over time you maybe get a little bit better of a sense of like what really brings you joy, and then also like what are the business models or the ways of operating in different spaces where you could apply it, and that'll make a big difference to your quality of life. I probably sound very like mechanical there, but to me, I think one of the things that I take away from working on something like normal is the business model you work in will have an enormous impact on like your quality of life. And that could be in a way where like in consulting, it's a client services business, which means ultimately you are at the beck and call of a client, like, and you will spend a certain portion of your time communicating in a polished way to the client about having done the work and how you're going to do the work, and aligning on how you're going to do the work, and also being responsive to what they want, which is great for some people, but for others will like kill their sense of autonomy, and might feel a bit bureaucratic, or a bit like you just want to go solve the problem, but you have to do all of this in between.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Journalism is actually, the idea behind it is quite romantic. You're helping people understand the world, but it is a business and it has to make profit. And if you can't somehow find the model that allows you to keep up with the purpose while still running the business, then it's difficult.
Yeah, it becomes really challenging to do what you came there to do.
Do you think then the message of that is, if you want to do something meaningful and be able to have the autonomy to shape what it is you initially wanted, you've got to be in a field that is marketable, that people need?
I would say it's really helpful to understand not just what you enjoy and what brings you joy, but also what the reality of working in a particular job or space is going to feel like, and then being able to kind of bring those together. And I think then you can start to make some interesting decisions about trade-offs. So for example, like one career strategy that I think, if someone's really interested in doing media but they don't necessarily love the idea of 10 or 20 years of grinding and doing work that actually isn't that reflective of the stuff you want to do in order to one day get there, like you may well find that if you're a smart, motivated young person who has that kind of work ethic anyway, like you could probably go find a job in a corporate or something like that and earn a fair bit more money, build transferable skills, and then be able to like go and work in media, or even just create the stuff that you want to create off your own bat later on. Like you sequence your career, so you're like, great, I'm going to establish financial security first, and then I'm going to go do media without the pressure of turning the thing I love into the thing I have to sustain myself with. So there's dozens of different strategies to think about that with, but I think it can be really valuable to understand the lived reality of different fields and then have a think about how you want to approach them. Oh, I would say there's also a rule of careers, which is like the sexier it is and the more people want to work in it, like the supply and demand equation is in your favor. So like the worse the working conditions are, like the more that demand to work, like entertainment, so much demand to work in it. So many people dream of being a sports star or a movie star or in the media, that the conditions are not very good.
Going off what you said, I haven't quit my full-time job yet. The benefit of that is that it gives me quite a strong negotiation position to say no to work. If there is a gig that I think won't be that safe, doesn't feel that safe, doesn't have a good environment, as opposed to if I had quit everything and I was hinging all of my financial income on comedy. It doesn't have to be that you have to stick with your full-time job. It could be, I don't know, having a paying side gig of trading stock or whatever. Something that helps you build your negotiation position so that you have more of a power to say no to things.
Yeah, and I mean, like what you're describing there to me sounds almost like a portfolio career where you're like have the principle that applies to investing, where you're like a diversified portfolio of assets will perform better than concentrating all your eggs in one basket. But same idea for careers, where like you might have a job that takes 2 or 3 days a week that's like you've optimized just for money. So you're like, for me back in the day, that used to be I would take contract management consulting gigs while doing pro bono work for the other days of the week. So you can like buy back your time, but for you that might be like you have your main job and then you have the thing where you're building an income and a profile in comedy.
But you also say it's important in the career strategy framework. It's also important to know when to start going 100% in. What's your advice for other people who are facing this choice?
I think it's really helpful to, for example, like there's a financial dimension of when to go all in, without knowing your personal circumstances. Like some people have the bank of mum and dad and generational wealth, and if you're in that circumstance, like congratulations, you're probably going to do well in the arts. But like assuming that that's not a reality for most of us, I think having a sense of what's my current earning capacity in the thing that you're thinking about doing, how long would it take me to get to sustainably covering my expenses? So if it's like it would take me 3 months or it would take me 12 months of doing it, and then how much money are you going to burn in the meantime? Like what's your personal burn rate? Like how much do you spend every month? How much of a cash buffer can you put together to deal with that? And then basically being like, do you have a good plan B if things aren't going as the way you expect, or if your assumptions aren't panning out exactly as expected? Because I think once you have the financial picture clear in your head, and then it's actually a fair bit easier because you can comfortably do creative work without feeling so stressed that you're actually a bit frantic. So I find like doing that as a baseline is a really good start. And then you might well end up, like I think most people think career change, like if you think of like, here's a chart. Here's a chart. But imagine on this chart that you're like, percentage of your time spent doing an activity, and then like, let's call it 12 months or 24 months or something. I think most people think career change is like, I'm 100% of my time on one job, and then Monday happens, and I'm 100% of my time on the next job, and it's just 2 blocks. Actually, most career change doesn't look like that. Most career change looks much more like you start at 100% and then you're like slowly, like it is transitioning over time to a point where you're replacing like the time and income with that new thing as you build a portfolio. And you build up like, I'm not sure where people make money in comedy, but like gigging, tickets, merch, podcasts, like you build up those streams of income. So I think a lot of career transition is it's more gradual, and like something I would love to make. I actually haven't sat down and done it, but I'd love to do like I think surveys of maybe 100 people who've done big career transitions and actually show you like the time chart and the money chart, because I think it could be really helpful to be like, how concretely should this look?
That's important because, again, I imagine my audience, a lot of them, would be impatient. They're feeling impatient. They're feeling they're stuck in the 9 to 5. They want to quit. There's like a trend now where you quit without having a next plan, which, to be fair,
I kind of did.
But
I had a buffer.
But you had a buffer, and you had a plan of what you were going to do with that year.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the impatience? Maybe is the
How do you deal with impatience?
Meditation and sitting with discomfort. No, I think like the risk when you're sitting with that impatience is that you make a big self-destructive decision, and then that decision can't stick because you've bitten off more than you can chew, and so you end up back where you started but feeling exhausted. Like, so I think it can be really valuable to manage your like motivation and energy and momentum quite actively for yourself. And that might be along the lines of like, you sketch out like, okay, I have a goal of I want to transition to spending half my week doing comedy within 12 months or something. And like the numbers don't matter. You don't necessarily have to hit them. It's more about like, it helps you focus. So like you start by doing that, and then actually working through like, okay, what are the input things? Like, what are the actions I am going to take that will get me there? Like working backwards from that, and then being like, okay, great, I'm going to, instead of rating myself and my success on my outcomes for a while, I'm just going to rate myself on my inputs. I'm sure you would have, like, this is classic in anything creative.
No, totally. The best advice I got was set yourself a goal of going to 5 open mics a week.
Definitely.
Do that consistently for a year and then see where you get to.
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot that people outside of creative fields can learn from people in creative fields when it comes to career change or like any kind of life transition, because effectively like you're having to deal with ambiguity and a lack of certainty that things are going to work, and still kind of finding the energy to put into it. So yeah, I think there's like, you know, the artist's way could teach most people useful things about how to change their life, and deal with uncertainty.
You're being too kind now.
we love the artist way, but I think there's, you know, if you have the capacity to do that, a lot of other things will probably feel a lot easier. It's also why athletes often like become, I think, like I've noticed a lot in my work how effectively like skills like being an athlete or being a creative translate into like having interesting and fulfilling careers. So I think that capacity to just like show up, do the work, do it even when you don't really feel like it.
Deal with disappointment.
Can be really, really helpful.
Well, you mentioned like momentum a couple of times now. How do you define it?
I guess in the career sense, I think a lot about where people get stuck. Like when I'm helping someone in a career coaching sense, and there's the two kind of big categories of where people get stuck. One of them is direction, which is I don't know what I want or where I'm going, and feeling that they need to invest a lot more time in self-reflection, in understanding what options might be out there for them, and then making a decision about which of those they might want to kind of head towards. So that's like one big pool of career problems is direction.
Yes.
And then the other pool of career problems is momentum, which is, I think, partly because we've all grown up in a school system where like you go through grade after grade every year and you're told very explicitly like, here is how to get an A, or like here is what you have to know to ace the test, or here are all of the steps that you have to take in order to be a success in this environment. That I think many of us kind of leave school or university and then transition into the working world and expect that it's the same. And so you're like, okay, great, I join the bottom of a ladder somewhere and I start just climbing that ladder and I will be rewarded for all of those decisions. I think people don't realize that they've entered they're playing quite a different game in careers, that actually Yes, you can sort of join a workforce and then just kind of keep following the incentives that are set out for you. And you'll have like a certain level of success and enjoyment, and for some people that might be an amazing career, but for a lot of us it'll feel pretty unsatisfying. And I think it's like finding the momentum to do something different, to not just kind of like tread through the path that is set out in front of you.
So like an activation energy.
Yeah, it's like activation energy and then consistency. So maybe call it like it's really easy. It's not really easy, but it's like, because it's relatively simple to like show up to a job where someone else tells you what to do, and you do that well enough that you don't get fired, and that's a pretty, like, that's almost like the default. I think for a lot of us it feels quite intimidating to be like, okay, I have to go and independently really think about what I want, and I have to go and find a pathway that people around me are not doing, and then I have to go and like step down that pathway and probably invest time outside of my 9 to 5 to really like put in the work on building new skills or building a new network or like finding a way to transition or studying something new or whatever it is.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's it's how do you get the momentum to continue doing that is what I find interesting.
Yeah, particularly when the path you want to try out doesn't have those structured achievement scales.
Like no one tells you the path to a Netflix special.
Exactly. And exactly. And there's no set thing of, you know, if I do a year of going to open mics 5 times a week, there's no guarantee that you'll get to the next rung by then, which is scary. People who are listening, they might be type A personality who are really drawn to that structure of achievement, but they also have a creative side that they want to tap into. There's a way to perhaps marry the two of them.
Even just being like turning down the noise on it a little bit for a while. Like I think a lot of type A people who are like anxious or high achieving or whatever, it's very easy to have a voice in your head that is like asking, is this good enough? Am I on track or am I off track? Like and questioning everything that you're doing before you've given it enough time to even see if it's going to work. And yeah, so I think it can be really just like as a useful cognitive trick to play with yourself to, for example, be like, I'm just going to give this like 6 months of not listening to that voice, or literally like turning down a knob in your head. I mean, like that voice can come back and will be useful later, but not right now.
What got me started into comedy was I wanted to apply to a postgrad in the US.
Oh, cool.
And they needed me to write personal essays. And I
like,
needed something interesting to write about. And my sister had floated the idea of comedy to me 6 months ago. And I had said, you're crazy, I'm not doing that. But then when I was doing the essays, I was thinking, maybe now is a good time. All I have to do is go up once and then I can write about it.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my activation energy from.
That's so cool. Yeah.
To whoever's listening, we don't have to completely destroy that type A personality in ourselves. You just have to find a way to direct it maybe to a different direction.
The other thing I would say as well is that I think people who are type A or who are just like organized and consistent can actually be incredibly effective in ambiguous environments as long as they can control the anxiety. But like that, you know, people who are really like organized and self-motivated can be excellent entrepreneurs. Or someone who I'm thinking of is Hannah Ferguson from Cheek Media, who we've worked with a lot for Normal and is an absolute dream to work with. So we work with lots of creators. Many creators are like beautiful humans who are absolute chaos. And Hannah is like an ex-lawyer and union official who has moved into being a creator. And so Hannah will I will send her an email, and then an hour later I'll get a message back that's like, so sorry it took me so long to reply. Here's like everything you asked for. I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. And it really like, it sets you apart in a lot of those fields if you have that like execution discipline.
The professionalism too, because comedy room bookers would say the best comedians are the ones that turn up on time.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, something that people who've been in corporate for so long take for granted. They're like, yeah, of course, that's so simple. But actually a lot of creatives...
Not so simple at all.
No. I think the other thing I wanted to ask was in terms of community. When you were making the big move and then taking off 18 months to try different things, who did you rely on in your life to support you?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there was a lot of lovely people in my life who were like, we don't understand this at all, but like, good for you. And then, yeah, so I think a lot of people who, and also maybe people who had known me for a long time who were like, you know what, you'll probably figure this out. It might just take some time. And so I think people who were supportive by not telling me I was insane was really helpful. There were a few friends at the time who had similarly portfolio career or freelance or who weren't working regular hours, were often in a similar space of life, and that was really nice too, just to have a friend who was finishing university and wanting to get into strategy and branding, and we would hang out for coffee and then go to co-working sessions. So I think it's nice to find people who are in the similar phase to you.
For someone who feels quite lonely because they don't have examples in their life of people doing creative things, what advice do you have for them to seek that network?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine coffee shops and board game clubs and bars, and I assume there's meetups and writing sessions, and if you start to throw yourself into a field in some way, that hopefully you can find people who are in a similar situation. Even you would often be surprised how effective it can be to just post on your stories or whatever, and say hey, I'm looking for people to be an accountability group because I'm trying to write this much. If anyone has any project they're working on and they want to check in with each other X often, let's do that. The people who I was teaching in the career course recently, it runs for about 4 weeks, but a bunch of them have started their own accountability group where they meet up once a week afterwards, just because they were to that point about momentum before, they want to maintain the momentum of trying to make changes that might take 3, 6, 12, 18 months in their careers. And it's very easy to get lonely, and Netflix or going to a movie is always calling. There's always something that will be an easy consumption experience that will not advance you towards the thing you care about.
The coffee thing is a good idea. So coffee every second Wednesday, take a day off work, go to a coffee shop between 9 to 5. Whoever looks like they're working remotely in a coffee shop, that's probably the creative you want to be friends with.
Yeah. I think, and there's lots of, depending on what city you're in, lots of good little
co-working,
hot desking spaces. I know tons of creatives who do versions of that, and that can be really nice too. People will gather because they're all solo operators who want to find a home. So I think there's even just Googling habit change literature, there's probably a ton of it that will be useful there. You habit bundling, where you do something that you enjoy at the same time as something that you don't enjoy to incentivize yourself to do it. You, I don't know, watch your favorite TV show while folding laundry, or TV show while folding laundry, or whatever. But I think there's actually a lot to be learned from anything that's about how to show up consistently, no matter what the domain is.
Last words of advice for anybody who's trying to leave their job or talk about sex?
Can I find something that works for both?
Or either one.
Yeah. I was is there anything? This is one of those great things that comedians would have a great answer to this. If you're trying to leave your job, be compassionate with yourself, and remember it's a marathon, not a sprint. And as long as you have a sustainable source of energy and a sense of where you're heading, it will go well. And if those things aren't there, then work on getting those. And for sex, probably the most boring advice, communication is everything, and that's how you talk to yourself and how you talk to partners. But yeah, learning to talk about sex is learning an entirely new language, so it's okay to be bad at it, and then you have to practice.
Thank you so much for coming on You Do What.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.